it is commonplace to hear tale of a small group of loyalist Astartes who have heard and let the words of the gods of chaos sway them from their righteous path. Sometimes these groups are no more than a handful strong, perhaps as many individuals as you can count on one hand. Other times they are a whole squadron, or perhaps multiple. Even on occasion, one might hear of whole companies falling into the grasp of the dark gods, shunning the Emperor's light in favor of the demonic and profane. However, it is rare, but doubtlessly disconcerting, when one hears about an entire chapter falling to the clutches of the ruinous powers. The likes of the Astral Claws, the Steel Cobras, and the Servants of the Truth are among the many that have fully renounced their ties to the Emperor and the Imperium. And among their numbers are some chapters of obscurity that fell from grace purely of their own volition, or their poor luck. The Knights of Apocalypse are an example of both. Originally known as the Knights Penitent, one of Dawn's many successor chapters, the Knights of Apocalypse were an obscure and vicious chapter hailing from the northeasternmost reaches of the Ultima Segmentum, practically right on the doorstep of the Halo Stars. There, on the medieval world homeworld of Centauri 5, the chapter held dominion since their inception in late M34, procuring a long but mysterious history of campaigns along the edge of the galaxy against strange alien threats, rogue populations of humanity left undiscovered, and even the odd chaos incursion stopped dead in its tracks. However, their remoteness left them far from the eye of the Inquisition and their myriad arms, making surveillance and maintenance difficult at best. Even the convoys of the Adeptus Munitorum and the Adeptus Mechanicus were hard-pressed to reach Centauri 5. The end result was a chapter commonly forced to rely on their own methods of armor modification and fixing, oftentimes leaving them to look almost as hodgepodged and anachronistic as most Chaos warbands tend to be, with armor made from various marks scattered about their ranks. The true trouble, though, began in the later half of the 37th millennium after a brutal campaign in the Klaatu expanse of the Halo Stars. Records are scarce in regards to what happened, but the one document discovered that described the event remains our best hope of understanding what happened outside of capturing a Knight of Apocalypse alive. Reportedly on the planet Barada, members of the chapter's librarians exterminated a population of cultists worshipping a strange, constantly morphing statue while clearing the path for the chapter's main task force. However, while clearing out the temple housing the infernal statue, a librarian of unknown moniker located a massive tome imbued with arcane knowledge and brought it with him back to the chapter fleet for research. From there, the records, retrieved by an Ordo Hereticus inquisitor named Williams, become vague and incomplete in nature, but with some work it has been pieced together. Upon returning to their homeworld, the librarians set about studying the tome, a book known only as the Apocrypha of the Nine Abysses, extensively records salvaged from the cruiser Curse of the Emperor's Wrath, indicating over a century of extensive work from the librarians to decipher its inner workings. From the notations of Ordo Malleus Inquisitor Victoria Arno, this was a very bad idea. Records taken from the archives of the Grey Knights have identified this tome as a powerful artifact of Tzeentchian origins, first seen on the battlefields of the Horus Heresy in the hands of traitorous forces of the Thousand Sons Legion. Its appearance was an ill omen for the chapter, from the metaphorical word go, and the results were more than predictable. By the approximate year 732 M37, the Knights Penitent were showing heavy signs of corruption in most of the reserve companies, and all but a demi-company of the third, whom had been on constant crusade for the last half-century and had been under heavy scrutiny from other chapters, including their own parent chapter. As for the main body of the chapter, crusading activity had ceased entirely, and command had been turned over to the same librarian that had taken the Apocrypha in the first place, an Astartes known only now as the Guardian of the Abyss. In a declaration heard by none but the astropaths, coincidentally in the region, the Guardian announced the chapter's secession from the Imperium, finishing his half-hour-long sermon with the sacrifice of over 999,000 citizens of the most psychically tuned population of their world to the Changer of Ways. the sacrifice seemed to have been heard by the Dark God as a system-wide warp storm enveloped the system, cutting off any and all entrance and exit into the system. The storm lasted for well over a century, bringing the attention of several battle fleets as they prepared for the worst to descend from the storm. Then, in 860 M37, all contact was lost from Battle Fleet Charybdis while they were patrolling near the storm. Instead, a single message returned to Ultima High Command. The Knights descend. Apocalypse comes. Since then, the Knights Penitent, now referred to as Knights of Apocalypse, have been an active threat along the Halo stars, participating in several of the Black Crusades as distraction or raiding parties to sow havoc amongst Imperial defenders. In fact, spies with the ranks of the Black Legion have been made aware of a shaky alliance between the Knights and the Black Legion, with Abaddon offering them gear, supplies, slaves, and weaponry in exchange for acting as temporary allies or diversions depending on the situation they are needed for. When not employed by the Black Legion, however, they perform numerous raids on the Ultima Segmentum, raiding and pillaging Imperial worlds to harvest supplies and souls to use for their nefarious deeds. Despite the obscure information that we do have of their fall, their current status is quite well documented, thanks in large part to spies and battlefield encounters with them at the hands of Imperial armed forces. In the century or more since the world of Centauri 5 was swallowed by the warp storm, now known as the Eye of the Guardian, it has transformed from a grassland-covered medieval world into a hellish, demonic fortress world in a twisted and psychotic funhouse mirror image of their Gene Father's greatest legacies, including the likes of the Imperial Palace. Stripped of breathable air and covered in twisted occult spires and complexes, the corrupt population now serve as slave labor, sorceress acolytes, or fuel for demonic ritual, rarely if ever allowed to see the bright blue star that sickly illuminates their world. Access to the planet is downright impossible, with the warp storm and the myriad hodgepodge defensive systems making the prospect of reconquering the planet practically suicide. And that is nothing to say of their ground forces, mainly made up of swarms of raving cultists, guided into battle by traitorous Astartes champions. On the offensive, the Knights of Apocalypse have gained notoriety for deploying fast-moving offensives backed by heavy siegebreaker units. While Vindicators and other large Astartes vehicles seem missing from their offensives, not counting a dozen Predators, records from the Siege of Onyx Haven indicate a staggeringly high count of demonic engines such as Forge Fiends, Helldrakes, and a supply of Defilers not seen outside of the likes of the Iron Warriors. Coupled with their genetic descendancy to Rogel Dawn, many an Imperial fortress or hive has been cracked open like an egg, allowing for their bulk-foot troops to roar into melee. However, their most iconic unit actually gave them their name to begin with. Their homeworld being a grassland medieval world was particularly known for hosting a rather large and rather terrifying breed of equine-like creatures, nearly the dimensions of the average Fenrisian thunderwolf, by all account, if not larger. As such, in strange deviance from the Codex Astartes, members of the Knights Penitent were known to armor and saddle these creatures when riding to war, rather than using the standard Astartes bike pattern employed throughout the galaxy. Despite the barren wasteland their world has become, the Knights of Apocalypse continue to breed these creatures, their forms now twisted with various chaotic growths, horns, sharpened teeth, and even Astartes firearms fused into the flesh of their shoulders and wired to the rider so that he may fire them on a whim. The end result is a fearsome force of Astartes thundering into battle on the backs of 3-meter-tall, ceramite-armored horses bristling with firearms, ramming horns, and usually a chainsword and a special weapon in the hands of their riders. Needless to say, it is quite the terrifying sight to see even minimum-sized forces of this type barreling towards even the staunchest of Space Marines. Other forces reported amidst the rank include highly aggressive forces of Possessed, several squads of Rubricae of the Thousand Suns, and several demon princes drawn to their fervent worship of Tzeentch. However, every so often it is recorded that the Guardian of the Abyss will ride into battle with them, shouting litanies in strange tongues as he is guarded and fought for by a force of cloaked and hooded Astartes with power swords, only known as the Nine Kings. Who these mysterious Astartes were or currently are remains a mystery, as they never seem to truly die. Even if they have been wiped out during a battle, they always seem to appear in the next battle looking better than ever, as if brought back through necromancy or possession of the armor itself. Between the coming of Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade and the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Knights of Apocalypse have been very active as of late. In a strange twist of events, the Warband has even begun to accept other chaos cults into their ranks, with worshippers of all four gods and even the Pantheon Undivided joining under the badge of the First of the Wheel. And with their territory being inside the Imperium Nihilus, they have spent the last century or so raiding and expanding around the Nostramu sector, bringing with it the ire and hatred of some forces of the Night Lord's Legion. But where such activities are commonplace, the Ordo Hereticus has turned their attention to the War of Beast on Vigilus and the sudden and very destructive arrival of the Guardian of the Abyss, with over 600 members of the Knights of Apocalypse in tow. What is it that they plan to do there, however, remains a worrying mystery.